Alright, we're going to cover the basics of a lot of material here. So pay attention in this particular lecture exactly to what I'm saying we're going to do. So I'm going to use this one as a chance to kind of write out our essential question, is what is plant nutrition? And how are nutrients transported? We're actually going to discuss 3 things here, but we'll take them one bit at a time. See what we can get out of it. Okay, so 3 things we'll talk about is kind of the uptake and transport of plant nutrients. We'll look a little bit about the soil, plant nutrients in the soil, and then we're going to talk some about symbiosis, because kind of after we finish up really this lecture and a little tiny piece of an intro to the next one, we're going to talk about fungi, and there's some really good plant fungi symbioses. So the uptake and transport of plant nutrients. This one's kind of important. This is sort of what we're starting a lab over. So this is what that's going to be related to. So plant growth uses air, water, and soil. Again, air is going to be kind of where we get in the CO2. We're picking up water from the kind of environment and the soil and bringing those up so we can complete photosynthesis. So plants obtain water, minerals, and some oxygen from the soil. A little bit of oxygen. The sugars made by the plant in photosynthesis use carbon and oxygen from the atmosphere and hydrogen from the water. Okay, so we talked about that. That should be a little review there. Plants use cellular respiration to break down some of those sugars to obtain energy, because it takes energy to grow. So think about kind of basic growth things. It's going to need energy to do that. And then also for consuming oxygen. Okay, so basic things here shouldn't be new information. Water's coming in from the roots up through the shoots. We're getting in CO2 from the atmosphere. Those are the 2 things that we need for photosynthesis. While we use light also, we'll create sugars which flow all the way throughout the plant. We'll have some oxygen taken in, a little CO2 taken out. We have a little bit of movement there, but overall we've got sugar throughout the plant that we can break down to make energy to be able to grow. Okay, so both cycles are still happening here. So a plant has to move water from its roots to its leaves and deliver sugar to specific areas of its body. Okay, and sometimes there's a great distance that we have to, move these sugars. So again, good review here. Root hairs really greatly increase the root's absorptive surface. It's a word. It's a mouthful. Especially because I'm chewing gum. What a terrible idea. Teach school and chew gum. Here, I'm going to spit it out. Move on. You can see in this picture the root hairs that we have here. They're kind of around the base, but that we would just kind of get this area here, but we really increase the surface area by adding these tiny hairs. So a lot more water can be absorbed. Water and solutes can move through the root's epidermis, so that very outer layer, and cortex by going through cells, between cells, and sort of a combination of routes. So just to look, if you think about, I don't have a pen today and it's driving me crazy. Okay, so here's sort of what we're looking at. We might have some routes that the water will take as it goes through cells. So it goes into the cells, it goes through those kind of plasmodesmata, which are the holes in the cell wall. See if we forgot that. Okay, what it can also do, so this is a different route, that it can kind of go outside and it can go kind of weasel in between cells. So water has a couple of ways of actually getting into it. So we think about the roots just absorb water, but how do they do that? Well, that's kind of our 2 paths that we look at. But once the water and the solutes reach the endodermis, a continuous waxy barrier called the Casparian strip actually stops them from entering the xylem through cell walls and instead forces them to cross a plasma membrane into an endodermal cell at some point. So no solutes enter the vascular tissue unchecked. So the whole point of the Casparian strip is really just to be a barrier and just to do some checking. So it's kind of like entering the airport. We're doing the checking here. It's your kind of TSA. It's check-in. Who are you? What are you having? What are you delivering here? We need water, but we also don't need extra stuff. Who's carrying that bag? Did you bring it in yourself? A lot of those kinds of things are being asked. Okay? So plants require a constant supply of water. Okay? Because photosynthesis. And with that, we need dissolved minerals from the soil. So this is provided as a xylem sap, and it's a solution of water and some inorganic nutrients that flows from the roots to the shoot systems. So remember, a xylem brings the nutrients up. Okay. Xylem sap flows through very thin tubes within the xylem tissue, and it's pulled by transpiration. So there's kind of that force of transpiration, or really water loss from the leaves by evaporation, that causes this to happen. So we're going to look at that. Sap movements aided by cohesion and adhesion. If you don't remember that, that's a water property back from biochem. Cohesion is stick together. Let's see if we get this together. And adhesion is kind of stick to other. So if you adhere to other. So if you adhere, like we're using tape to adhere, it's the tape sticking to something else. So it's sticking to other. And so that kind of property, because of the hydrogen bonds of water, is what is able to pull that stuff against gravity. So this actually requires no energy expenditure. It's just one of those natural, awesome things that water can do for us. Okay, so here's the whole route. It looks like a lot, but let's start here. Okay, so what happens, we've got xylem sap that's kind of in there, but what we pull water in from the soil. Again, it goes through cells, around cells, whatever it can, and then eventually after it gets through that kind of Casparian strip, it enters into the xylem kind of structures. As it moves up, it continues to stick to each other and stick to other stuff like the walls of kind of the xylem, and it continues to move up. Notice they're sticking to the walls here and sticking to each other. So it's this whole thing of pulling each other up. Okay? And they continue to move up, and then what happens is they get to openings called the stoma, the stomata, in the leaves, and the water will break off and evaporate. And as it breaks off and evaporates, it fills in a gap. There's another gap that needs to be filled. So water just kind of keeps coming in to fill this where it's being broken off. And that leads to the stream of water coming completely all the way up against gravity. So the basic nature of water, that adhesion, cohesion, those hydrogen bonds, those kind of little dotted bonds there, that's what's pulling it up against gravity. It's pretty amazing to look at. So a plant must make a trade-off between its need for water and its need to make food by photosynthesis. So that we have a structure, some guard cells that actually help this. So we have stomata, and they can open and close to help plants adjust their transpiration rates. And it's by changing their environmental conditions. So guard cells are kind of at the opening of the stomata, and they can sort of change shape to control how much it's open. So here's sort of what it looks like. There's a lot of things to this. We're covering the basics on this one, but what we would have is like a stomata here. The stomata is kind of the hole in the middle. And the guard cells around can change, but they can change a little bit to where they change structures. So they actually narrow that opening so fewer things can kind of get in and out. So that's the guard cells kind of opening and closing the stomata, or the stoma. So in general, stomata is the plural, stoma is the singular. So stomata are open during the day and closed at night. But even during the day, guard cells may close stomata if the plant is losing water too fast. So the whole point of guard cells is to reduce water loss. Okay? Because we want to keep water there as much as possible. Okay, so a plant has two separate transport systems. Again, that's xylem and the phloem. The xylem transports that xylem sap, which is water and dissolved minerals. The main function of phloem, though, is to transport the products of photosynthesis, so the sugars. So the sugars send the glucose to where they're needed. Okay. So the phloem sap transports inorganic ions, amino acids, hormones, and the main sugar. So it just transports all the kind of important stuff. Plant biologists actually use aphids to study the flow of phloem sap. I didn't do this one in particular, but I know somebody who worked with this stuff. I worked with aphids a lot, and they make these sugary things because the pressure in the phloem sap actually force feeds an aphid, so they really just have to have their little mouth part in it. It's a sucking mouth part called the stylet, and they put it into the little area where there's phloem, and they're able to just continuously feed for hours. Okay, so that's what these guys look like. Okay, I'm gonna tell you, this is an ugly one, but there are some much cuter varieties, and that's what they do. They just put their little mouth parts into the plant, and then they sit there for like ever, and they create little dews of sap, which, believe it or not, ants love this stuff. So then you can get like a little ant, and he'll come along with his little 6 legs and whatnot, and he'll come eat the little aphid poop because it's really just like sugar water. Fun facts about animals. And so anyways, that's their stylet kind of into a cell in order to get that phloem sap. Real quick before we take a break, we'll have our Easter egg. Our extra credit this time is for the Sophomore Student Council. They have asked enough times and really wanted this one. So if you want some extra credit, we're going to help them out, and we're going to support our fellow classmates by bringing a few things in. Try to bring these to me by Friday. I mean, we're getting class time to do this, so write it down. Try to get it on your way home. Some of the stuff, if you have at home, and some of it you can get at the dollar store. Come on now, $1 for some liquid Dawn soap, that's not hard to get. Trash bags, we can get those at the dollar store. Even I think it has some bleach. Okay, you can probably get some of the rest of these things there. So it's not an expenditure, and we're going to help out some special pals at the animal shelter. They're a no-kill shelter. And those are sometimes hard to come by these days. If you have some gently used pet bowls, towels, stuffed animals, toys, sheets, or blankets at your house, bring them up to it. You got to make sure you bring it to me so I can write your name down and make sure that you get extra credit, and then we'll make sure that we put it aside so we can help out this animal shelter. So if you would like to receive extra credit toward your exam this time, towards the exam, you must bring this in to me, and I must see it and be able to write it down. So bring stuff in, and new things or used things. You know what to do. We're helping out kitties and puppies. And probably some weird animals in there too. That's okay. We like weird animals. Okay, good place to take a break. If you need a break, take one. Write down what supplies you have. And then come back. Alright, so now we're going to talk a little bit about plant nutrients and the soil. So just about what some of that's there. So if you've heard about some of these things, we've talked about nitrogen in the soil. This gives you some of that background too. Like, why Venus flytraps? What do they have to do because they're in nitrogen-poor soil? What does that mean? So we're going to talk about this. So to survive and grow, a plant has to obtain carbon dioxide and some inorganic substances. Inorganic just means non-carbon. Okay, it doesn't contain carbon. So essential elements are those that a plant must obtain to complete its life cycle and have reproductive success. So essential elements are pretty descriptive. It is essential to it being able to survive and reproduce. So we've got some hydroponic studies, which just means that you grow sort of a plant and you grow it in sort of a bubbly tube of water. That's hydroponics. And they've studied to identify 17 elements essential to plant growth. We've got 9 macronutrients or big nutrients that we require in large amounts, and then 8 micronutrients that we require in just little amounts. So both types of nutrients have vital functions. Gotta have both. Okay, so there's a hydroponics, much better drawing than what I would show you. We actually grew, we grew tomatoes this way when I did research. So you fill it up and you bubble it full of water and minerals and all kinds of good stuff, and then you make plants grow. Oh, our plants were infected with nematodes. That was also fun. Anyways, here's the 9 macronutrients. So almost 98% of the plant's dry weight consists of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. So a good chomps. Okay, easy enough. We already know chomps, or P.S. Chon. So all those things are still important. Should make sense. About 2% of the plant's dry weight consists of potassium, calcium, and magnesium. So we need some of those as well. So potassium, calcium, usually in ions, magnesium, those are always important too. I would say they're usually ions. Is it Ca2+? I can't remember. I have to look it up. Easy fix now. Here are the 8 micronutrients that we also still need. Chlorine, iron, manganese, boron, zinc, copper, nickel, and molybdenum. Now, do you need to know all these? No. But at least you see that there's some of these that we actually kind of both need in small amounts. So the availability of nutrients in the soil affects the plant's growth and health. So we need nutrients for growth and proper health. Growers can often determine which plant nutrients are missing in the soil by looking at those plant systems. So nitrogen shortage is the most common problem for plants, is not getting enough nitrogen. So if we have this one here that we're looking at and it's healthy, we can see it's nitrogen deficient if it's sort of yellow in the middle. If it's phosphorus, it'll get these purple edges. If it's potassium deficient, it looks like it's on fire on the edges. So you get to know what the plant does when it's not quite healthy enough. So we can apply fertilizers, which are some compounds that are given to plants to promote growth. And there's 2 basic types, inorganic and organic. Inorganic would contain some inorganic, naturally occurring kind of compounds. Organic are going to have some chemically complex organic matter, usually something like compost. And you can think like manures and stuff like that too, where we've got some decomposed organic matter. We've got some stuff that we're applying that has carbon. Okay, so it's a nice compost heap for you. Good times. So soil horizons are layers of soil with different characteristics. Just so you know, we've got a couple of layers, just so that you get an idea. The top soil really is the soil on top. There's a little bit of like humus there, which is some decaying stuff. There'll be B, which has less organic matter than the top soil and less nutrients. And then C would be kind of the parent material. Not something super necessary, but the idea of topsoil is that usually there's kind of a layer of where we need a lot of good nutrients in that topsoil. Okay, human agricultural practices have actually degraded soils. With improper irrigation, it's really wasteful, and we've over-extracted groundwater and certain nutrients. Back in the day, they used kind of the rotation sort of method, crop rotation, where they would put the minerals kind of back in certain ways. So some Native Americans had it a little bit more figured out with rotating crops. We just don't do that on the scale anymore. And so soil erosion can lead to these kind of dramatic changes in the soil content like you see here. So plowed lands are subject to erosion by wind and rain. It removes all that topsoil, exposing the crap underneath, which is not as good for growing plants. Okay, so just more craptastic things that are happening to the soil that we need to make foods. Some good soil management, though, does including water conserving irrigation, erosion control, just kind of minimizing herbicides and fertilizers. Because herbicides are kind of the killers of weeds, but if you're killing weeds, you may end up killing beneficial plants as well. So it's just kind of minimizing and trying to keep it, you know, as natural as possible. But it is tricky to do. And we could go into a whole discussion on how poor agriculture has to answer to the consumer and how that ends up actually creating practices that aren't good for the consumer. And so it's just this kind of back and forth and tug of war. If you're interested, we can talk about it. I accidentally ended up in a bunch of agricultural stuff. Not by choice. All right, so organic farming actually includes agricultural practices that promote biological diversity. So you can think about, if you see organic on the packages, They try to maintain soil quality through natural methods, maybe crop rotations and some other things. They try to provide a habitat for predators of pests rather than relying on synthetic pesticides, and try to avoid GMOs. There is a primary goal of organic farming is to achieve sustainable agriculture, which is a better idea, and conservation-minded, environmentally safe, profitable. It sustains itself, so we can continue to live off of it. But the ultimate aim of many organic farmers is to restore as much of the soil as drawn from it, creating fields that are more self-sustaining. So sustainable, they can sustain themselves. But some of the benefits of organic farming are obvious. Fewer chemicals, less risk of exposing farm workers to toxins. However, despite the popular perception, an organic label is no guarantee of health benefits, and there's no scientific consensus on whether organically grown foods have a higher nutrient content or work better. So it's kind of up in the air. I had one other thing to add to this, that really just caution that how produce is harvested, handled, and prepared can have equally significant effect on the nutrient content. But really the big thing to remember, and you guys maybe don't quite feel this as much as I do as an adult, but remember, fruits and veggies, no matter how they're grown, are really important for your diet. And albeit they're not the tastiest thing, but by the time that you get to be my age, you're like, dang, I just should really eat some fruit, and it will really just like help me feel a little bit better. You got to have some age on you for that, but think back to that. Regardless of what method it is, organic, inorganic, doesn't matter. Fruits and vegetables are still good for you. And I will put that point home all day long. Don't stop eating fruits just because, fruits and veggies just because, oh, is it organic or not? Who cares? Eat the darn fruit. Eat the veggies. All right, so a person actually does die of hunger about every 2 seconds in the world. And so every day about 40,000 people, including 16,000 children, die of hunger. 800 million people around the world suffer from malnutrition. I'm sorry, that sounded insensitive. It really did, because I'm giggling while I'm trying to read about malnutrition. And I will say this is very sad. This dog is outside of my door whining. That's what I was laughing at. And that's not funny. I'm going to chew her out here in a second for making me laugh during something really serious and important. Because 800 million people around the world suffer from malnutrition. Seriously, that is a problem. I'm going to kill this dog. I swear to God. All right. Advocates of plant biotechnology believe that genetic engineering of crop plants could actually be the key to overcoming tragedy of world hunger. Now, this is a serious thing, though, is we don't see that luxury because we have the luxury of eating all the time. Food is available. We don't always see that. But there are a ton of places where they can't get food. All right. It's a good time for you to take a break. Apparently, I need to take a break and let this sad, sappy dog into this room so that way she can, whatever. Okay. All right. Plant nutrition and symbiosis. The dog is now in the room. There's a lot less sadness outside the door. So the Earth's atmosphere actually consists of about 80% nitrogen. There's a ton of nitrogen in the atmosphere. However, nitrogen deficiency is the most common nutritional plant problem. What? All right, actually what happens is plants actually can't absorb nitrogen directly from the air. Right. Instead, plants have to use nitrogen that's converted either to ammonium or to nitrate. But it can't use anything like N2 that's floating around in the air or anything else. It's not usable for it. So it needs to be converted. So soil bacteria actually convert the kind of nitrogen gas in the air into usable forms. So we'll have nitrogen fixing bacteria that convert the N2 to NH3, called nitrogen fixation. That's ammonifying bacteria add to the supply of ammonium by decomposing organic matter. Nitrifying bacteria actually convert ammonia to nitrates. So we've got some ammonifying, nitrifying, nitrogen fixing. I will say the nitrogen fixing are probably the most common that we talk about. So I won't worry about the others. That's the idea here, is that there's bacteria there that will fix it to the nitrogen in the air to an ammonium, which then we'll have nitrifying bacteria that will also move it in. But any of these bacteria can convert these things to compounds. Things. Any of these bacteria can convert the nitrogen to usable forms of nitrogen within the plant. The words are hard this evening. Here's a good one. So this is our connection into the fungi that we'll be talking about soon, is that about 80% of plants form a mutually beneficial symbiosis with fungi called mycorrhizae. So sym means together, bio is life, sys is kind of a process. So it's a process of life living together. And this one's a beneficial symbiosis, so there's life together is good. So the mycorrhizae act like extensions of plant roots, and they increase the surface area for water and minerals to come in. They secrete growth factors. They secrete antibiotics. They've evolved with plants, and they're important for successfully colonizing land. All right, long button on that. So you can see the fungal filaments kind of there surrounding the root, giving an extra surface area, but then also sort of providing all these extra benefits. Like it's an extension, and then it's antibiotics, so it's like a little doctor. Then it gets it more stuff, and then it gives it like extra, if it doesn't feel well, give it a little extra drink of water. I don't know. Maybe it's like a parent, a very sweet parent. So some plants form symbiosis with nitrogen-fixing bacteria, legumes like beans do, that genus Rhizobium. Other plants, such as alders, form symbiosis with other kinds of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. So the plan is that we've got lots of plant symbioses that give us these kind of beneficial relationships. Plants provide the bacteria with carbohydrates and other kind of organic compounds. Like it throws some sugar that it makes. Like, oh, I made some nice sugar. Thanks for hanging out. And so everybody wins here. All right, so you can kind of see nodules in the roots, and these things are all getting along. The bacteria is living in it and giving it all kinds of good kind of nitrogen nutrients, and then it's able to give it some sugars back. Here's some other things, and we're getting close to the end here, but some plants have nutritional adaptations that take advantage of other organisms. So this is not mutual at all. This is sort of parasitic. This is bad stuff. So we've got things called epiphytes. So epi means kind of above, and phyte is a plant. So these are plants that live above other plants. So notice they grow anchored on other plants and absorb water and minerals from rain. So orchids are an example on that one. Parasitic plants like dodder and mistletoe, that lovely thing that you think about at Christmas time, they actually may not use photosynthesis, and their roots tap into the host vascular system, and they absorb sugar and minerals from the host plant. Mistletoe, that thing you're supposed to kiss under, is like a parasitic plant. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? So there's some epiphytes for you, some orchids growing up top. A little bit of parasitic plants growing up. Okay, there's some mistletoe for you, being up there and being parasitic and awful. Again, we have our carnivore plants, just to give them a little bit more kind of a understanding here. We've got carnivores like a sundew plant or the Venus flytrap. They typically grow aside these kind of acid bogs and other habitats that don't have nitrogen. So they obtain most of their nitrogen and some minerals by killing and digesting insects and some small animals. The sundew has modified leaves that have these tentacle-shaped hairs with sticky, sugary secretion that traps and ensnares insects. Very dramatic, but look what it looks like, though. It does, and it's so sticky that the more that these little guys try to fight to get away from it, the more that it entraps it. Oh, that's where, you know what, it seems like almost the Venus flytrap would be better, because then it just closes in on you. But no, this one, it's like, I can still see the world, but I cannot get to. Again, you gotta thank your lucky stars. That's not your life, The insect world, the animal kingdom, is brutal. You don't wake up and wonder if you're gonna get stuck on a sundew, and that's gonna be it. You're gonna be okay. So the Venus flytrap has hinged leaves that quickly close around insects. As an insect walks, it actually triggers some hair sensors that close the trap, which we're going to talk about sort of in the next class period about what this is called, because we need some plant responses, and that's a plant response to touch, and that has a very specific name. So the leaf that secretes digestive enzymes and absorbs nutrients from the prey. Okay, so we've seen that guy doing his work. All right, just shy of 30 minutes. Yes. All right, so that's your next lecture. Again, focus on kind of the major key points about like how nutrients are moved, what are our major nutrients, and then what did I just talk about? Might have to go over notes on that one. Now, how nutrients are done, and then just kind of what we need to use for those. So some of those adaptations. So look at the three major sections. Take a look at them. The symbioses and things like that, those interactions. So look at those things and make sure you got a good handle on them. If you have any questions, shoot me an email.